Welcome to the final days. Today is January 27, 2020. In this video, we will be discussing more information on what's coming in mid-May of this year. We will also discuss the origin of the coronavirus and where it was manufactured, and we will also be viewing some celestial objects captured by the Alaskan and Canadian FAA weather cameras over the past few days. The purpose of this channel is to show the viewers that we are living in the very last days according to the Holy Bible, and to explain why this is actually good news and cause for celebration, explained later in this video. While viewing the FAA video footage, please remember some elementary rules about lens flares. 1. Lens flares of the sun don't rotate. Our sun only rotates once every 27 Earth days. 2. Lens flares of the sun don't contain craters and heavily textured exteriors. 3. Lens flares cannot go behind clouds or other structures in a video or picture. 4. Lens flares of the sun can never react to sunlight in a video. For example, a lens flare cannot become partially illuminated by the object causing the lens flare. Please remember these fundamental facts as we go through these FAA videos. Our first FAA video comes from the southeast camera in Soldotna, Alaska. This footage shows a red celestial object being partially illuminated on the left. For two reasons we know this can't be a lens flare. It is partially illuminated, and it also disappears behind the clouds in the last frame. Jesus describes the last days in Luke chapter 21 verse 25 when he says that we will see signs in the sky when the end is near. Christians are commanded to watch for these signs and wonders signaling the end of the age, so that we are not ignorant of the very late hour in which we are living, in order to be spiritually prepared for what lies ahead, and so that we can help others become spiritually prepared. When viewing these images from the northwest-facing camera in Twin Island, Alaska, please keep in mind that we are looking to the northwest, starting at 10:30 in the morning, local time. The sun is rising in the east, but we are looking northwest, almost in the opposite direction. Thus, this cannot possibly be the sun rising. But something very large is obviously rising here. In the foreground, all we see are ocean waves. The celestial object we are viewing is part of a planetary system that has now intermingled with our own solar system. It will be making its closest pass to Earth during the time of the biblically foretold Great Tribulation, which may be upon us now. This is why mid-May might be a very rough time for Earth. Several scientists are tracking a highly magnetic celestial object traveling with this inbound planetary system. Its gravitational properties are so forceful that it bends light, space, and time. For this reason, it cannot be viewed directly, but its path of destruction can be monitored and projected. Mike from around the world, who appears periodically on the Paul Begley channel, has alluded to this magnetic object and has warned us that in mid-May this object will have an effect on our planet. Terrell Blackstar has a channel that shows weekly updates on the path of this object and the resulting waves of earthquakes and erupting volcanoes that occur whenever Earth is in a particular alignment in relation to this highly magnetic object. In mid-May of this year, Earth will be in close proximity to it, and the amount of destruction that will result is impossible to forecast at this time. However, Mike from around the world says that he will know more in February and will discuss it then on the Paul Begley channel. He's also going to be on the Paul Begley channel again on the 30th of this month. Homeland Security instructed all U.S. citizens to have a 6-month supply of food and water on hand. Since we don't yet know the level of destruction that will come, this is wise advice. Earth could experience some magnitude 7 earthquakes and some increased volcanic activity, or it could be as bad as magnitudes above what can register on the earthquake monitoring equipment, with widespread volcanic activity on land and undersea, and possibly widespread power outages. Right now, we don't know which. As soon as I get an update on this, I'll pass it on. The video you are watching now shows how a huge celestial object is made nearly invisible by the atmospheric chemicals that are spread throughout our atmosphere continuously by military jets. A highly classified craft marked with a circle works with other equipment in place to hide these enormous objects from public view. As always, a line can be drawn from the reflection of this craft to the black dot that produces a gigantic circular glare, and the hidden celestial object always falls upon that line, without exception. Untold trillions have been spent on the technology to hide this approaching system. The reason is because the enemies of Christ do not want you to know how close we are to the end. The enemies of Christ do not want you to give your life to Jesus before your time runs out. Information is at the end of this video instructing you on how to accept Christ into your life. The circular glare produced by NASA's manufactured light source can be very inconsistent depending upon where it is viewed from. This camera in Attawapiskat, Ontario in Canada shows NASA's manufactured light reducing to a fraction of its size in just minutes. In the fourth frame, it actually reduces down to about 1/3 of its previous size, and then 2 hours later the light suddenly shrinks down to 1/5 its original size as the real sun goes behind a mammoth classified structure in space. But NASA's manufactured light passes in front of this structure, lighting it up. Of course, it would be ludicrous to even imagine that we could see something like this behind our real sun, 93 million miles away. Here's a better view of this enormous structure captured last March of 2018 on a rare day when the atmospheric chemicals had failed to hide it. An astronomer once told me that this was a nebula. However, a nebula would not be following Earth on its journey around the sun like this object does. I don't have labels or names for any of these objects, but I can tell you that all of these are signs that we are living in the very last days. I would imagine that the powers that be will have to use war as a cover-up for the destruction coming from this approaching planetary system, because they will never, ever allow the public to know that they've tracked this system for years and didn't tell anyone. The powers that be will never allow the masses to know that something like this was hidden from them for years. A very common sight in the far north is to see NASA's manufactured light stretch across the horizon so that the glare covers up any celestial objects from view, such as this object which is emerging from the glare, captured by the southeast-facing camera in Esther-Dome, Alaska. The contrast and close-up images of this footage show that this celestial object has a definite rotation and is heavily cratered, telling us that this cannot be a lens flare of the sun. The south-facing camera in Gustavus Dock, Alaska, captured a very red, fast-rotating, highly textured object crossing the sky. As NASA's manufactured light begins to catch up with the red orb, the black dot equipment emits a black beam in preparation for the eclipse. We see the pink reflection of the craft although we don't see the craft itself here. This footage shows two different celestial objects. One red object that's eclipsing the sun, and a much larger white object that has been blurred by technology. Once again, the celestial object falls upon the red line. In several of these frames, we see the black dot reflecting upon the water surface, proving that it's an actual piece of equipment and not a camera or lighting issue. Here's another example of the black dot reflecting upon the water. This one is the southwest facing camera in Old Harbor, Alaska. The camera in Isabel Pass, Alaska shows a reflection of the bell-shaped projector. This is a reflection, and we've seen this thousands of times. It prevents eclipses from being seen. In the images with contrast, we can see a highly textured surface on this very large celestial object. Now, unlike some of the other objects we've been viewing, this one is moving in the opposite direction of the sun. The sun is rising, traveling in a southward direction, and on this screen, left to right, and in the morning. And the celestial object being hidden by the bell-shaped projector is actually traveling downward or setting, and it's moving in the opposite direction of the sun. It's going from right to left. This is yet another sign that we are living in the very last days. In Casagluck, Alaska, we see two different celestial objects traveling close together, possibly gravitationally bound to each other. We see NASA's craft rushing into view to hide these objects. The object in the foreground has an obvious rotation and a very textured surface. On the right, we see the pink reflection of the craft swinging into view. Here's a close-up of both the craft and the reflection of the craft. As the eclipse occurs, NASA's manufactured light passes in front of the celestial object, while the real sun goes behind it, concealing the eclipse from public view. Again, the pink reflection of the craft is always lined up with the center of NASA's artificial glare and the celestial object being cloaked. The camera in Mekoryuk, Alaska, once again demonstrates how effective the atmospheric chemicals are at hiding these celestial objects. Only with contrast added can we see this red, highly cratered object. It may not look big, but in the close-up images, look how tiny the cluster of buildings are in relation to the red rolling object. Just to show the enormity of this object, here is the moon just before setting on January 12th. And here it is next to the red celestial object we just saw on the Mekoryuk, Alaska camera. This tells us how enormous these objects are. This is why earthquakes and volcanic activity have increased nearly 1,000%. These objects are pulling on Earth's tectonic plates. They have caused very erratic tides around the globe, which are not mentioned on mainstream news. From the Kipnuk, Alaska camera, we see a reflection of the bell-shaped projector hiding another eclipse. This red, large, rotating object is moving in the opposite direction of the sun. It is very well hidden by the atmospheric chemicals. Even with contrast, it's difficult to see. However, a close examination of this object reveals its direction, rotation, and cratered surface. Here's an eclipse that can be seen any day that the atmospheric chemicals are not terribly heavy. This was captured this month by the south-facing camera in Sitka, Alaska. We see the reflections of a variety of equipment moving in to hide the eclipse. NASA's manufactured light once again passes in front of the celestial object, while the real sun passes behind, so that it's not obvious an eclipse is occurring. Here's a better view of this eclipse from some older images on this same camera. I like this footage because it shows the reflection of the bell-shaped projector very well. And also in the very last frame, the black dot in this footage is reflecting upon the ocean. I missed the first part of this eclipse, viewed from Chilkat, Alaska, but I did manage to capture the last part of it. Here we see a heavily cratered celestial object in a very fast rotation, and it's heading in the same direction as the sun. As promised, I'll discuss the origin of the manufactured coronavirus that has become prevalent around the world very recently. The Bible refers to an epidemic or a plague as pestilence. In Luke 21:11, Jesus tells us that in the last days there will be pestilence, earthquakes, famine, and signs in the sky. One of the channels I watch is a Christian channel called A Servant's Heart. Last year, 2019, Sister Betty described an open vision she had where she was taken in the spirit to Antarctica, and she was shown the laboratory where the virus had been manufactured. God told her that the only reason it had not yet been released is because the vaccine was not finished. She briefly revisits this topic in her January 24 video titled, "It Has Begun," and other words. Now that the virus has been released, we can assume that a select group of individuals has been given the vaccine to protect themselves. Many unbelievable events are now happening all around the world. The New King James Version of Luke chapter 21 verse 36 reads, "Watch therefore, and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass." Jesus is referring to God's wrath. He is saying that those who are counted worthy will escape all of God's wrath. The Bible repeatedly promises that faithful followers of Christ are not appointed to God's wrath. But to be counted worthy, we must be living in holiness. A link in the description box below discusses what holiness is and how to achieve it. We must realize that we are an eternal soul on a temporary journey here in a temporary flesh body. The real you is an eternal soul, not that temporary flesh body that you see when you look in the mirror. You must look at life from this perspective in order to overcome. Your eternal soul was sent into this flesh body in order to learn things that you cannot possibly learn in a perfect place like heaven. We are here to learn how to love people who are difficult to love. We're here to learn how to forgive people who are difficult to forgive. This life is where we learn how to deal with loss, grief, sadness, loneliness, anger, and other emotions that plague our temporary flesh existence. We are here to learn to love Christ out of our own free will and live according to that love. This is your purpose. This is why you were sent here. The next few screens will tell you how to accept Christ into your life. Simply pause the screens if you need more time to read the text.